When we let our dogs off leash, we are giving them the freedom to make their own choices. If we want them to choose to come to us when we call them, then we have to make it very worth their while to do so, especially around competing motivations like interesting smells, other dogs, or prey. So, what is an emergency recall cue? It is a unique cue, typically a sound, that predicts high value reinforcement, typically a lot of good treats. Consider this. What would it take to get you to come when called on cue and reliably to a spouse, a family member, or a friend, regardless of where you are or how busy you are doing something else? Would a thank you be motivation enough? What about a couple of dollars? Maybe if you're in close proximity and bored, but probably not if you're intensely focused on something more motivating. But what if you knew you would get paid $1,000? We all need motivation, and dogs are no different. So, what is the equivalent of $1,000 to your dog? I'd guess around 20 to 30 small pieces of real meat fed one after the other for about 30 seconds will blow their mind. When we talk about motivation, it is important to also talk about how saturation and deprivation will affect it. Emergency recall cues are meant to be used sparingly to ensure your dog does not become saturated in the reinforcement you are using. For example, if your friend calls you over for $1,000 50 times in one day, by the end of the day you'll have $50,000 and you'll be less likely to be motivated by only 1,000 in the future. Or if your friend reinforces your behavior with chocolates too often, you will either get sick of chocolate and or physically ill. Since we are reinforcing our dogs with food, we need to be careful not to overfeed them or train when they are already full after a big meal. Practice recalls before meals so you know your dog will be hungry and motivated to come to you for food. Also, limit repetitions to 1 to 3 per day, and don't be afraid to take days off too. Another trick to keep your recall exciting and avoid saturation is to rotate the high value treats you are using so your dog never knows what type of food to expect. Most people have already used the cue come and either under reinforced it, punished the dog for coming to it, typically unintentionally, or a mix of both. Because of this, but also because conditioning works best with novelty, I suggest you pick a brand new cue or sound to use for your emergency recall, something you have never used before, but also something you will not use casually in everyday life, such as your dog's name. You could use a whistle, silent or not, or any word. The sound is not as important as the treat party it comes to predict. But remember, you will be yelling this cue, so you want it to be easy to enunciate. I typically use the cue here or now, but you could use the word bacon if you wanted to. The next step is to prepare your high value training treats. I like to use real meat for this training as much as I can. Today, I have store-bought roast beef and tripe and salmon skin dog treats ordered from Only One that I cut up into small pieces. Aside from being generous with your reinforcement, the other most important aspect of this recall is that your new cue becomes conditioned to be the predictor of that reinforcement. Reaching for treats before saying the cue is the most common owner error when training. Anything that tips the dog off to the treat party before the cue will overshadow the cue, meaning we will not get the conditioned response we need. It is of the utmost importance that the cue precedes any other indicators that your dog might get treats. Always aim to say the cue when your dog is not looking at you or your treats. So remember, always follow this sequence to ensure you are conditioning the recall cue and not the sight of you reaching for food. Say the cue, prompt the dog over if needed, grab their collar, more on this in a second, and then get out the treats and feed for 30 seconds. A quick note, I will be yelling the cue now in the following videos. If you plan to use the same cue, then do not let your dog hear the rest of this video. This is because in order to get strong conditioning, we want a strong 1-to-1 ratio between your dog hearing the cue and the treat party it predicts.
Now! Good girl, come here. Good girl, good girl. What's this? Ooh, what's this? Ooh, so good. So good.
So, why do the collar grab before reaching for treats? Because then collar grabs also become conditioned to predict food, which not only trains your dog to want to come right up to you and wait to be grabbed, avoiding the drive-by recall, But more importantly, this ensures that in a real emergency, even if you don't have food on you, you can still grab your dog. If your dog has a history of collar grabs leading to negative consequences, they may become avoidant when you go to grab their collar. If you notice this, stop using collar grabs in this plan and work on reconditioning your dog to like them separately. Step 1 is to cue your dog inside your house with no distractions from 5 feet away. You want to practice when your dog is not expecting it. Say the cue loudly as you would in a real life situation, then prompt your dog over, grab their collar once, then feed for 30 seconds. You have already seen me do this once for rep 1. Repeat this 1 to 3 times per day until your dog runs to you at the sound of the cue alone. Still praise them when they arrive. This usually takes about 4 to 5 reps.
Now! Good girl! Good job! Yes, good job! Oh, good job!
You might have noticed I spread the food on the floor or later on the ground. If you live in the city or want to avoid your dog eating things off the ground in general, then you can hand feed treats one at a time. Also, always take extra caution when doling out high value treats around other dogs.
Now! Good girl! Good job! Good girl! So good. So good. Now! Good girl! Good job! Yes! So good.
For step 2, we move outside, but we continue with no distractions and calling from only 5 feet away to set your dog up for success.
Now! Good girl! Yes! Good girl! Come here! Good girl! Yeah! Good job! So good!
I am practicing outside without a long line or fence because I have already trained a different emergency recall cue and practiced a lot of casual off-leash training with my puppy Nettle. If you cannot trust your dog off-leash yet, then use a harness and long line to ensure your dog won't get away from you, but be aware, long lines present their own risks. They can tangle around your legs, clothesline bystanders, cause rope burn, or knock you off your feet. Fenced areas are a great way to practice without a long line.
Now! Perfect! Yes! Good job! Good job! Here we go. Oh, good job. Oh, let's see if we can get this in film. Good job. Ooh.
Step 3 is the same as step 2, but we increase the distance to 20 plus feet.
Now! Good job! Good job! Good job! Good job! So good! Good job! Yes! Perfect! Now! Good job! Good girl! Yes! Good job! Come here. Oh, did I get you? Yes, I did. Now! Good girl! Good job! Can I grab you? Good job! Yes!
Step 4 is where we start to add distractions. Since this makes the recall harder for your dog, we want to decrease the distance to 5 to 10 feet again to make it easier and set them up for success. Every dog is unique in what motivates and distracts them. The most common distractions are smells, toys, other dogs, people, and/or prey animals. A hound dog is likely to be more motivated by smells than balls, whereas a herding dog is more likely to be the reverse, though it can still vary. Some dogs are highly motivated by all of the above. The bottom line is that if you want your dog to recall off squirrels, then you have to practice recall around squirrels.
Now! Good girl! Yay! him the treats. Good.
Step 5 is the same as step 4, but we increase the distance to 20 plus feet away.
Now! Good girl, yes! So good, good job! Now! Oh, wow! So good, get your color, good job! Ooh, so good, so good. Got salmon for you.
If your dog does not respond at any stage in the plan, do not repeat the emergency cue. Instead, go back a step or two in the plan and do more reps at that stage. Any failed reps in this plan will compromise the conditioned response we are training. Remember that in order to get strong conditioning, we want a strong 1-to-1 ratio between the cue and your dog coming for a treat party. Step 6 is where we start working with high-level distractions, but again, we decrease the distance to help our dog succeed.
No! Good! Good girl! Oops. Camera fell over. Good girl!
Little biscuit treats. They're not very high value.
Okay, come here, Nettle.
So I'm just gonna sprinkle them here.
Okay, find it. Now! Good girl! Yes! So good! Yes! So good! So good!
I use the release cue, okay, go, after every recall. This means the dog is free to go back to what they were doing before being called, teaching them there are no downsides to recalling off distractions. And in Nettle's case, that means going back to finish the biscuits. But it also means you're done giving out treats in case you encounter begging. Step 7 is the same as step 6, but we increase distance to 20 plus feet away.
Now!
Don't stress about the exact details of the plan. Just remember these 3 important points. Number 1, you want to ensure that your special cue is the only predictor of the treat party. In other words, cue when your dog is not expecting it, and don't reach for the treats before you cue. Number 2, use amazing treats and be generous. Reliable reinforcement equals reliable recalls. And number 3, set your dog up for success and only cue when you are 90% sure your dog will respond. If they don't repeat the cue, rather save it to try again later when they're less distracted. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed this video and dog speed with your emergency recall training.